Okay, so it's 6:03, so we're going to go ahead and get started because we do have a lot to cover tonight. I'm glad to see that we have two of our three students in class that came back, and we have seven, well, say seven of you online, but one of them's me. So we have six of y'all who came back. I'm happy for that. I hope this just means everybody who's not here or online are going to be watching class later. Before we get started, does anybody have any questions that we need to go with? And y'all are just stuck with me tonight. Tim is probably traveling for work or a work conference. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So tonight we're going to make up last week's lecture of privacy law fundamentals. A lot of this gives you the basic idea of privacy. I will be sure to always point out what you absolutely need for your assignment, so don't worry about that. I wouldn't, if I were you, feverishly take notes because we post the slides. So, I mean, you're welcome to take notes feverishly if you want, but to me, it's wasted effort. So I would rather y'all just participate in this. So we're going to talk tonight about what privacy law fundamentals are. And kind of this is going to be more like where we get this notion of privacy. So in defining privacy, the dictionary in Cambridge Dictionary defines it as a state of being alone or the right to keep one's personal matters and relationships secret. And what happens in this class is because, again, like we talked last week, it's, computer science, data science, data engineers, everything kind of gets grouped into the idea of like cybersecurity. But privacy is completely different. That definition has nothing to do with anything, no technology whatsoever. Like, my purse is here on the floor. I have a right to privacy about what's in it. If you can find something in it, you're welcome to it. But I have that fundamental right. So this is how the dictionary defines it. The law dictionary defines it as a person's right to control access to his or her information. And that could be, paper information, electronic information. Again, not necessarily anything having to do with technology. Just a regular Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines it as freedom from unauthorized intrusion. So broadly speaking, privacy is really the right to be left alone or freedom from interference. So we have multiple ways that we get the notion of privacy that has nothing to do with technology. And this is important because in this class, you really, and really in practice, you've got to put on a hat of somebody who is not in IT. Because again, like we talked last week, doesn't matter how wonderful you design the system if somebody leaves the front door open or unlocked. So, all right, so what we're talking about, privacy, it's really like the laws, the regulations, the practices, the policies about how we gather, use, store, process, disclose, maintain personal information, which we all know what that is. And it is one of the areas that there has been the most activity, probably up until AI now, over the past decade, but there's also a lot of sensitivities around that because, there was some legislation. So right now, I could go out, if you own a home, I have a right, I can go out to the county clerk in which you live and look at your information. I can pull your address, your name, general information about your mortgage holder. I can see your mortgage document. If you have any liens on it, I can see your tax records. And some people feel like that's an invasion of privacy. Does anybody want to maybe take a gander as to why we allow that kind of stuff public? Because those are things you might think you would have kept private, right?
Maybe in case a background check has to be done on you, maybe you got a new employment, you're trying to run a background check, or maybe you're trying to register for, let's say, a DoorDash or something, we just run.
Well, and that's good. Somebody online said creditworthiness, Robin did. I don't know the exact reason, but I would suspect that number one, your taxes are based on your property values. And so people want to go out and see what that value is and do assessments for, do I want to build a Walmart here? Or are you paying your taxes? Because your taxes also determine where you pay taxes, what school district your children are assigned to. Also, it has to do with having your property lines and your property plat information is indicative of when you call 911, what police department or what ambulance service or what fire department is going to respond to you. So I feel like it has more to do with that. I don't know that that's the actual reason, but I think it has to do more with that because your taxes, your school districts that are tied to those taxes and things like that are involved. But, you know, so the geographic information office is in my department at work. And that is one of the things they do. So somebody goes out and buys property and then they decide to build a subdivision and they record these plats in that office because, you know, in Little Rock, you think, okay, Little Rock PD is going to respond. Little Rock Fire Department is going to respond. What if you live outside the city limits? Is it the county? Is it the unincorporated, maybe volunteer fire department? And there's very lines on where 911, you know, like 911 operates everywhere, but this is the line of whether, you know, West Pulaski Fire Department responds or a Saline County office. So it's things like that. It's pretty neat. Unless you start looking at these maps and thinking like how 911 operates, I just have always taken it for granted. When you call 911, they just automatically know. But I think that's probably the reason why that information is public. Okay, so we've got 4 classes of privacy, generally. Information privacy is what we probably think about in this class. It's people that are collecting your information. All your electronic, non-electronic, because, you know, it used to be paperwork, all the information about you personally. Your bodily privacy, and this is really important when it comes to especially like search and seizure, which I know Tim will talk about the 4th Amendment and search and seizure later in the semester, but it's your physical being. You know, I think it's important because, you know, we think of like a body cavity search, right? But what about genetic testing or drug testing? You know, one of the things when you get convicted of a felony here in Arkansas, they specifically order you to give a DNA sample. You know, but I'm not a convicted felon, so I don't have to give one. But if somebody wanted to compel me to do one, that's an invasion of my privacy outside being the convicted felon or, you know, other things. You also have a territorial privacy. This is really big now that we have drones, you know, and things like that. It's intrude your own environment. There was some legislation passed in Arkansas this past legislative session that prohibits a drone from essentially flying over your property and your backyards and things like that. Because otherwise, drones can just come up to your windows, they invade your backyard. Doesn't matter what you're doing, but they're in your space. And so that's a big one now. And then our communications privacy, whether it's our correspondence via email, telephone, or even your mail with communications. So these are kind of our 4 general classes. They all, to a certain extent, depending upon where you end up working, may come into play. Like you might think, I don't have to worry about bodily privacy other than maybe as an individual. But what if you work for Ancestry.com or 23andMe? Or you work at some kind of medical lab? What if you work at UAMS that is doing genetic testing? Or you work at the Red Cross? You know, because they have all the, you know, blood testing and things of that nature. So you may encounter any of these. All right, this is probably one of my favorite parts. Where do we get the notion of privacy? Which I know y'all can see over there. So that, well, I don't know if y'all can see that. I can't. But so where do we get this notion of privacy from? And we get it from religious texts, number one, which, you know, that's definitely not in the realm of the technology that we think of today, but it's referenced many times in like classical Greek law. It's in the Bible. There's freedom from being watched is recognized in Jewish law. The Quran even has teachings of Muhammad, like privacy and prayer and avoidance of spying on those things. So, you know, we get it from religious text. We get it legally. There's the Justice of the Peace Act from 1361, which came from the idea of like peeping Toms. And then the Protection of the Home Act, which this is from 1765. It's one of my favorite quotes ever. But essentially, this quote says that it doesn't matter, what your home is. The King of England cannot enter, that you have privacy and this right to be in your home, to defend your home. You cannot cross the threshold. You may be the king here in England, but you still cannot cross my door without being invited. So we have, some areas of law. And we also have some in the United States Constitution, which I know with the Supreme Court nowadays, it's arguable where that comes from, but there are still basic tenets that come from that. The modern day privacy laws are, interestingly enough, based from an old German law, and they really wanted to prevent the atrocities that happened during World War II. Because for those of y'all who aren't familiar, and by no means am I a World War II or a history scholar, but the Germans, and one of the reasons, like the concentration camps and the atrocities and all those things that happened during the war, they kept meticulous records. They kept records of all the people that they brought into the internment camps. They kept records of when they were born, when they, were killed for those that were, or if they got transferred, height, weight, where they came from. They kept meticulous records. And it was one of the reasons why they ended up having, all the criminal charges after the war. But people wanted to prevent that. And with IT beginning to grow, there was a lot of fear of, could that happen again? So over the next decade, you can imagine that the European countries, particularly, they enacted a series of national privacy laws. They were all different. This was, of course, before like the European Union and all that operating together. And the U.S. passed its first privacy law in 1970, which was the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which we talked about that last week. It's just, when you go to apply for credit or anything that somebody's going to extend you credit, that's why you get the little letter in the mail that says, this person, or email now, requested your credit. Here's your credit score if you want to dispute it. And that's because of Fair Credit Reporting. Like, you have a right to know what the credit bureau file has on you. You can go out there nowadays and get, your free credit report yearly. And that's one of the reasons it's in this act. So in 1973, the Fair Information Practices was published by a now defunct, but U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And it was kind of in response to the beginnings of more automation. Obviously, the use of computers and the internet, whatnot, but it's the beginning of more automation. And then in 1974, you had the Privacy Act. However, though, I still wouldn't necessarily say that the U.S. has a standardized, widely apprised privacy law, and that's one of the big problems. It used to be just an issue for constitutional law when you were in law school. It dealt with those things like, the hot button issues, abortion, birth control, the Communist Party, Fourth Amendment search and seizure. Nobody really put the idea of privacy into the modern terms that we think of it now. And it definitely wasn't an issue for corporate America because they were all still operating on paper. So when the mid-90s, the rise of computers, everybody's going, everything online, everybody all of a sudden has the internet, it started to become an issue. And right now it is just a patchwork of regulation across the country. Everybody does it slightly different. There are some people who have similar, but it's all different. Okay, so we have what types of information, which we covered this last week. You've got personally identifiable information. It's information that is directly identifiable or indirectly in combination identifiable to you. Your name. So Jennifer Davis. I wouldn't call that a direct identifier necessarily because it's so common, but Jennifer Davis with my birth date. Jennifer Davis with my address. Jennifer Davis with my phone number. Those are those kind of things. I find it interesting that the U.S. generally looks at anything that is covered by one of the privacy laws, which we did last week. There's a ton of them. The EU, they're moving forward over here. Are they moving for y'all?
Not for me. I just see the first slide.
Okay, well, hang on. I thought I was doing good on having this. It's over on that. But if I move it back here, then it doesn't work. Hang on. Hang on.
Hit the stop sharing button and then just try to see if we can reshare it. Yeah, that will make it on the.
Okay, it shares over there, but it's not sharing in full screen. Tim's not here, so I thought I was doing good because it looked okay in here. So I wish somebody would have told me sooner. Okay. Tim says we have to drag it over there. Oh, wait. Hang on. I think I know what it is.
And then
Where is my mouse? There it is.
I lose that thing all the time.
Okay, no, that still didn't work. Why is it not working?
Are they seeing it? Are they giving me feedback?
I mean, I've got this up right here. We can see the.
Oh, you're actually in Blackboard.
Yeah, we can see this. Right, but you can't see the actual presentation when it goes. So hang on, I'm working on it. No. We can see the slideshow on this side. We can't. It's not working on the share screen because we can see the show on this side.
Okay, so yeah, so what I'm seeing, I'm in just a student view here. I'm seeing it. Now when you go
But you don't see the presentation.
I do. I'm seeing PowerPoint when you go full screen.
But you don't see that.
Yeah, I'm still seeing.
Okay, hang on. We'll figure it out. Go
back to the share, and instead of sharing screen, try sharing
application.
Yeah, just see if we can move those. So window, maybe what's entire screen give us?
Oh wait, hang on. Is it this one?
Now I'm seeing your Blackboard screen.
I promise you, this is the most difficult portion of the class.
Yeah, so yeah, try that one. This will be the screen here. Now go back over your PowerPoint and go full projector mode.
Right. Okay.
We got it.
So you got to show the application. I mean, the whole screen.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry.
The slides will be out. Like I said, for those of y'all who might have just joined, there was no reason to feverishly take notes, so you didn't miss anything. Okay. What I find interesting about the PII, if you look at the US, the EU, and Canada, it's all similar definition. In Japan, personal information is only data relating to living individuals. So I'm assuming the presumption is once you have passed and you are no longer in this world, you no longer have this right to privacy. So I find that one interesting. We have sensitive personal information, which is just that kind of subset of those, highly protected things, your social security number, your bank account number, your driver's license, and, your health information. And health information is typically included as sensitive. And why would you consider that? Health information versus anything else extra sensitive? There is some information after a number of years that's available, but not all. Somebody asked online that they thought in the US it was that way after 70 or 90 years and all information is available, but it's not. So health information is typically, I feel like, more protected and it's considered sensitive because, perhaps you have a condition or disease that you do not want your neighbors to know about, your employer to know about,
My insurance company.
your insurance company to know about. Those are things that you could be blackmailed because, perhaps maybe, like I say, if you have, a terminal illness, maybe you don't want people to know these things. So health information is just because it gets, I think, not just to the information about ourselves, but it goes into that idea of bodily autonomy as well. It was a big issue, obviously, during COVID about whether or not, you could be vaccinated or you could be forced to vaccinate. And, but like I say, health information is just more protected because I think it touches not just information about us, but, our basic bodily autonomy that we have to live inside this body. And it happens, I will tell you, side note, divorce information is available in court records here in Arkansas, and I'm sure most places. And when I was in law school and I was working at a firm, I had to pull information, and there was a husband and wife who were divorcing. And, in there, like, who got the house, who got the car, who got this. He had to pay alimony. But then there was a line in there that said the husband was responsible for a certain amount of payment. I don't remember how much it was. For the wife to seek treatment for the herpes she contracted as a result of his affair. Okay, I understand she was very, very angry at this whole situation, the affair, the sexually transmitted disease. However, that is out there in the public for anyone to know. And I wonder why her attorney, ultimately it was her decision, but that is exactly true. Anything you say can and will be held against you. But her attorney should have cautioned her that now anybody who, she's very, very mad at the moment, but she is going to be very mad 10 years later at herself when she realizes that is out there for everyone to see. So just think about that. And then we also have non-personal information, stuff that, corporate addresses is non-personal. So some of the things when we go through some of these privacy laws, and these are the things that you're going to have to start thinking about when it comes to terms with your, especially your final assignment. But who does the law apply to? That's a big thing. Like everybody says, oh, well, you can't ask me if I was vaccinated during COVID because that's a HIPAA violation. Well, you are not covered by HIPAA. HIPAA applies to, health insurers, doctors, hospitals, labs, things of that nature. It might extend to your employer as such as they provide healthcare benefits to you, but not like I am not bound by HIPAA. Now, obviously, would it be in bad taste if you told me something medical and I told people? Yes, but it is not a HIPAA violation. The Fair Credit Reporting applies to those people who are getting credit, creditors, people who are issuing them. So you have to, whether it's a financial institution. So you have to look at who does the law apply to and what does it protect? What information is covered, what you can and cannot do, what rights apply, if there's any enforcement, what does the law impact, who benefits or harms, and what happens when the law doesn't tell you what to do. And these things are important in the sense of like, not all privacy laws have a right to tell you what they have on you. Like, Fair Credit Reporting, you can go get your annual credit report and they have a right to have to tell you and a way to correct it. Your health records, you can go make a request. And you can make a request for corrections, but there's not necessarily a guarantee that's going to be corrected if it's a doctor's note versus maybe an incorrect insurance code. For banking institutions, there's a different thing. So it's really important about this. Also, it's important that, like, if I don't want to agree to the Fair Credit Reporting responsibilities, that's fine, but I also will not be issued credit. Whereas, you know, maybe I don't have a right to, you know, opt out of certain things from my mortgage company, but I have a right to not have to have a mortgage at all. I mean, I hurt myself for that, but those are things to think about. And so some privacy harms are, we talked about this a minute ago, is embarrassment. Again, maybe you don't want people to know that your credit is bad, or that you have a lot of debt, or you have a communicable or sexually transmitted disease, or a chronic illness, or anything, no money in your bank, whatever the case is. Maybe you don't want people to know this. Some of the harms are, it's just bothering, you know, like people don't want to be bothered. Like, I mean, how many times have you ever applied for credit and then all of a sudden you were inundated with the robocalls and the letters and all that stuff wanting to issue you more? So people find it bothering. Could harm your reputation, or at least a perception of your reputation. There could be safety, security, or control issues. Identity theft, of course, is huge. There could be discrimination with people finding out your personal information. Can you think of any of the other harms? I think most probably fall into one of these buckets. You know, reputation, as far as, I mean, that could be like Target's reputation took a hit after their breach, you know, so it could just be a corporate reputation as well, not just your own. So here in the US, a lot of regulations, a lot of laws, some states, some federal, some you have to do at the international level. Most of the laws have all been industry-based, whether it's health, it's financial, things of that nature. There's no general nationwide applicable U.S. privacy law, and it does cause an issue when you work in a multi-office across jurisdictions, multi-jurisdictional office, whether it's multiple states, multiple countries. What about, you know, states that border Canada or Mexico, or that regularly do business there? You've got different countries. So there is just a whole lot. And there is a lot of ongoing debate about how to approach it. Some states have taken it into their own hands to create one, because the nation as a whole has not. You know, GDPR in the European Union is at least, and you know, they seem to operate through the European Union as states, so I don't know why we can't get it together, but there's a lot of symmetry there. It's just there's a lot of discussion about what rights individuals have. Some people say, tell me everything, we have a right to know all this. Other people say no. Some people don't have a problem with collecting your whole Social Security number, when maybe possibly you only need the last 4. Some people say it's too burdensome to go in and change a system that uses your Social Security number as your ID. Like when I came to ULR, I got my undergraduate degree here. When I came here, they were just starting to implement the T numbers. They still used your Social Security number as your student ID. And it's just a lot of debate on the right way to go do it. And even interestingly enough, all the sector specific laws are all different anyways. They all have different mechanisms. So it's not like you could even take one of those and apply them to multiple sectors. So, and there's a lot of scandals.
Do you see organizations like looking to simplify by kind of picking the most rigorous, like GDPR?
That is exactly what I think they do.
And then use that as their baseline?
I do.
Across the board, or do you see like, oh, this person lives in California, so they get X, Y, Z requirements, and this person's in Arkansas? It seems like it just eats your lunch and just gets you out of whack. It seems better to do something like, okay, this one's the most stringent. We're gonna.
And that's what I see. Especially, a lot of it's going to depend on where you operate. So if you don't have, and there's no indication at all that you're going to operate that's going to indicate or implicate GDPR, they're not going to use that one. They will use like maybe New Jersey's or California or something like that where they operate. But I do see that they are going to use the most stringent one because it's easier to apply rather than having to configure a system to do 5 different things. If you'll even look at like some of your privacy notices you get in the mail, on the backside it say, for customers in, and it might list the states, this also applies. It's easier to do that and blanket apply it than it is to do other things. Now, if you do operate in a state or anywhere that GDPR is going to be implicated, I do think they follow that because it is much more strict and there are fines with it. And so it's just easier, and the most strict one gets it. Okay, we're going to talk about a few key laws. We're not going to talk about them a lot because, again, you don't have to know these in depth. The only ones you will really have to even know, and when I say know, I mean be aware of, is the California Consumer Privacy Act and GDPR. Those might be something you just need to be aware of, that if you were dealing or with kids, but your final assignment does not have to do, I don't think it has anything to do with kids. But you might need to make a determination in assignment 5 whether or not, if you have California residence, does the California Consumer Privacy Act apply or GDPR. Now, when I say that to you, if you determine, and I'll just say this for assignment 5, we'll say it again throughout the semester, if by the time we get, or to any of your assignments, if you feel like the California Consumer Privacy Act or the Children's Online Privacy Act or GDPR would apply, we do not expect you to write an analysis of how any of those apply. It is simply enough to say, for California residents, the California Consumer Privacy Act applies. Or for European, residents, the GDPR applies. Because one, you can go out to a website and find it and copy it, but it's wasted effort because we do not expect you to do an analysis on that. We are most concerned whether or not you think, there's a law that applies here. So it is simply more than enough to just list it that it applies, or it doesn't apply, either way on how you determine it. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so here's a few of the key privacy ones. We talked about the Fair Credit Reporting. It's the accuracy, privacy, fairness in consumer reporting agencies. Interestingly enough, because the only choice of whether or not we want to be in one of the consumer reporting is whether or not we choose to have credit. Like you don't have a choice of whether or not you're in Equifax or TransUnion or anything like that, but it generally applies to credit, insurance, and could be employment. There's a lot of employers nowadays that are also doing credit checks. Generally, all of these are done purely by consent. You consent, you check a box when you hire, and do a background check, or you check the consent box when you apply for credit. So most of this is done by consent. And you can find out what's in it, and you can also dispute it. Okay, the GLB. This is for financial institutions. This is what basically requires the bank to not allow anybody else in your accounts. The big thing that comes out of this are privacy notices. Like you get your notice every year in the mail. Ralph Nader called it the biggest waste of paper in human history because the notices were very dense and unreadable. When they first came out, they were like 6 and 8 pages. Let's be honest. Nobody's reading that. Does anybody even read the terms and conditions when you download an app? No. So the question was, is anybody reading them? So are you aware of your right to opt out? Like my mortgage is with Chase Manhattan Bank or Chase Morgan. I don't even know what they are. Chase Bank. So I can't opt out of that because I have an account with them. But their notice will tell me they have third parties. I have a right to opt out of those, but they have a little chart on the back. They've now condensed them to like 2 to 4 pages. But the question is do you even know you have a right to opt out, or do you even care? And so the question is, even are the new ones useful? The HIPAA privacy rule, we know this one probably we're most familiar with it. It's what kind of health information you can use. It gives rights to patients. Some people question whether it's too strict, too lenient, whether there's good enforcement. Does it apply? How does it apply? It's very misunderstood. But here's who has to comply with HIPAA. Not individuals. It's not an overall medical privacy law. It deals with the actual providers. Interestingly enough, when HIPAA first came out, there was a conduit exception. So you provide the internet connectivity to a health insurer, or you are a third-party IT consultant that just manages their servers. You aren't actually getting the information, but rather just acting as a conduit. So there was an exception for HIPAA, but one of the updates, the high-tech update, actually made, they did away with that conduit exception. And so even though, so my department, the Office of State Technology, houses the servers and maintains the network for the Arkansas state government, of which Medicaid offices, the health department, other medical providers that are responsible under HIPAA, we can maintain their servers. We used to be exempt, but now we have to do a business associates agreement, and that means it binds us to HIPAA as well. And so if anything happens, our employer, we have to report. We can get in trouble. So that's important to note. It kind of became a national, the de facto national law, just because you have to worry about HIPAA, and it was the one you most encountered, whether it's, you're at the grocery store, at the pharmacy, you go to a doctor's, all that kind of stuff. COVID definitely brought it up. But you have to worry about it, because if you do business with somebody or do business with somebody else who receives it, you're bound by it. But non-HIPAA healthcare data is getting a lot of attention as well, like patient support groups, what privacy do you might have in 12-step fellowships, wellness programs. Now everybody's got mobile apps for telehealth. Are there other people in the room? Just say if you're doing mental health therapy through telehealth, they might worry, are there other people in the room influencing you and things of that nature? So there's a lot of discussion about that. And there is a lot of pressure to do something about that type of data, but nobody knows what to do about it. Okay, so for websites, this is quickly, almost every website you go to now has a privacy policy. And if you've never read it, on January 1st, every company you've ever signed up with sends you the email for their updated privacy policy. Every January 1st, I'm like, oh man, I forgot. I need to go out and unsubscribe because I no longer use this site, but January 1st. Now, for California, though, it applies to any person or entity that owns or operates a commercial website or online service, which is pretty much just about everybody nowadays, that collects and maintains PII from a consumer residing in California who uses or visits the site. So, the Walmart.com it applies to, the DoorDash in California, anything that operates and owns there in California. So essentially what you need to remember about that when it comes to your assignments is, does anything in your scenario implicate California residents? If so, you need to have a blurb that this applies. Again, don't need you to analyze it, just need you to say it applies. Children, we talked about this one last week as well. If you collect information from children under 13, you have to have very specific upfront permission from the parents. Facebook has it and all that, Snapchat, now it's Discord. But what do kids do? They just go out there and lie. So it doesn't matter anyways, but they just lie. California, again, you don't have to do an analysis of this A, B, and C of whether it applies. Just know that if any of your assignments have to do with California residents, you need to put a line in there that says for California residents, the CCPA applies. All right, so those in the dark green, which are few, have and this is actually more, this is as of July, they're coming up, states that have privacy legislation. So if you operate in Texas, none of your border states have one. But if you operate in Nebraska, 2 of your border states have a privacy law. So if you, especially are operating on a border town, those are things to pay attention to. You know, if you're in Delaware, New Jersey, all that area up in there with Virginia, Maryland, you know, those are things you got to pay attention to, especially because they're all going to be, there are similar tenants, but the requirements are going to be different. And you got to stop that yawning.
Sorry.
No, I got up at 3 o'clock yesterday morning so I could drive to Bentonville for a conference and got home at 9 o'clock last night. So I'm very tired. So we're going to get through these presentations and then we are all going to go home for the night. Because Tim's not here, so, but we will have done our work. It's like if you eat your food, then you can have dessert. But so you can see not even half the states have some. You can see that there were some, like in Arkansas, it was not a comprehensive privacy, because keep in mind, some of these are not comprehensive. But Arkansas had some drafted, but they never went anywhere. They died. So a lot of these states, you could see how they have died. Now, I think Washington has actually adopted some by policy. So that's good.
Do these types of initiatives, do they draw quite a bit of corporate dollars to fight? I mean, I know, you know, I'm not trying to be cynical, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, do they actively draw resistance from?
A lot of it's going to depend on where you are, honestly. I mean, in California, there might be some more than I think in some other places. So a lot of it's just, and honestly,
California is doing a lot more with theirs too, right?
right.
So,
I will also tell you, in my experience, yes, Washington does have that. And like I say, they've got some that they've adopted by policy as far as just generic, not sector specific data. My experience from being involved in legislation in Arkansas, because that's part of my job, is I have to watch it, monitor, and all that. A lot of it depends on what other issues are on the agenda. If there are other hot button agenda items, sometimes you can get stuff passed under the radar because everybody's paying attention over here. Sometimes nobody wants to deal with it because focus is going on the big issues. So it's just going to really depend on really and also where the climate's at. I mean, I guarantee you so the conference I was at yesterday, Alice Walton was there. For those of y'all who don't know, she is one of 3 children of the Walmart founder, Sam Walton. She is the richest woman in the world she is the richest woman in the world and the 15th richest person in the world. I think her net worth is like 110 billion. That's a capital B, billion. And so it's definitely the closest I've ever been to a billionaire before in my life. If the Walmarts of the world said, we need to get this legislation passed for a statewide non-sector specific privacy law, it would pass. So we all know that unfortunately money does talk, and so do issues. So it just depends. And you know, regardless of where you fall out on the spectrum, we are in an interesting political climate, and we have been over the last few years, especially, you know, COVID really divided us. There's been a lot of things. So some of this is not really on people's radar. It started to make progress, but then again, politics is an interesting thing. All right, we talked about international data issues. You know, you've got, especially if you're a worldwide company, you know, like if you're a UPS of the world, a FedEx, a DHL shipper, you know, you're going to operate all over the world. So you've got to pay attention to where you're operating, because there are a lot of European countries. I mean, you know, the GDPR not only has stricter laws than we do, you know, like India, and I want to say Bangladesh introduced some legislation that's there's a whole lot of different things, because again, when you're operating worldwide, you also not only have to look at the legalities of it, but there's a lot of cultural issues that need to be addressed that are going to be different. What may be culturally acceptable here is not culturally acceptable, you know, in India, or vice versa. And so you have to really pay attention to that as well. Okay, GDPR, we're not gonna, this, again, I don't expect you to ever give us an analysis. What you need to know is that it applies to organizations that either have an EU presence, like physical locations in the EU, or that process personal data in connection to offering goods and services or monitoring of individuals' behavior within the EU. So if you are marketing to EU residents, even if you're a US company, if you're the Disney World of, you know, wanting to get Europeans to come to Disney World and you're sending them information, even though you're a US company, GDPR applies. And so you'll need to know this for your assignments, because it may or may not apply, but either way, your final assignment needs to have something in there about it does or does not apply. So keep that in mind. Other than that, you don't have to do any analysis. Simple line. Enforcement all over the board. You know, Office of Civil Rights will do some HIPAA. There will be some fines, the FTC, the do not call list, which with robocalls is kind of worthless. You know, enforcement's all over the board. Some of the hot topics that come up, which we're not going to talk about in detail, healthcare data privacy with telehealth, we mentioned. Third-party vendor management's huge, because, you know, you may say your vendors have to, you know, comply with our security protocols. And this is way more than just privacy. But are you ever asking them for their security reports? Are you asking them for their audit reports? Are you asking them for what their security protocols are? Otherwise, we just take their word for it. So vendor management is a huge issue. This is a very big issue right now with AI coming on the scene, because if they change a model, well, how does that affect your system and using it? Surveillance, the biometric tracking, facial recognition is a big thing. Both, you know, you've got the idea in the world of terrorism, but you've also got red light cameras and how they use it, or other things like that, that isn't some kind of intrusion. AI, which we all know is exploding off the charts. The app permissions, I think that there was a thing, I wonder if that was, I thought it was one of the iOS versions. When they first came out, they had embedded basically a provision in the terms and conditions that you would, you know, like deliver your firstborn child. Everybody, of course, clicked it because nobody ever reads those. I think some of it, the US privacy, and also in getting in with the AI, that's another tied in with the privacy. Probably some of the first legislation you're going to see is going to deal with children, because, you know, they're the most vulnerable population, and how are you going to protect kids? Because, you know, nowadays, the discussion we had yesterday was, you know, kids' mental health, because they're in front of a screen. I think they said on average kids are outside like 7 minutes a day, compared to being on a screen for like 7 to 8 hours minimum. So, you know, how are we going to protect that because of mental health? Like, you know, how can AI, instead of pulling them in even more, you know? Oh, you're fine. And then quantum computing, which Tim will probably talk about that later. I'm not smart enough to understand that how that works, but that's the kind of thing that keeps Tim up at night, quantum computing. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about this? I told you the few things you needed to know, but we had to get the primer out of the way. Questions before we move on to our other presentation about identifying PII? I'm trying to get us out of here, guys. Unless y'all are upset and not upset about not getting your full 2 hours and 40 minutes. Okay, so just a few final little things. In the late 90s, Sun Microsystems CEO already said you have zero privacy, so get over it. And that was just in the 90s. I wonder what he thinks now. It's time to admit that privacy in healthcare is dead. Privacy is dead and social media holds a smoking gun. Now, I definitely believe that, because people put all kinds of business out there on social media. Now, we all know, we all still have a friend on Facebook that we aren't really friends with, but we still follow because their life is a train wreck and they post it all and it's entertaining. We all know it. But some people, they post way too much information. Like some people need a therapist or a friend or like something. Somebody in their life needs to go, girl, you need to, getting information from the internet is like taking a drink from a fire hydrant. 100%. And relying on the government to protect your privacy is like asking the peeping Tom to install your window blinds. So these are things to think about. Okay, we cover questions? All right, let's see if I can figure out how to get the other presentation up. Now, I will tell you, I will warn you now. Okay, so going back to Kaplan, but it's true. If you're in the government, if you are in the government-run healthcare marketplace, you have to give financial and health data for them to determine rates. I know, it's crazy. And here's the thing, like, I know, and I don't want this to turn into a political discussion, but they talk about like, I've heard a lot of discussion about like the whole like cloud seeding and like is the government like creating, you know, these storms and weather events and this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, have you ever gone to renew your driver's license? Do you think the government is that smart that they could do this? I mean, or tried to renew your passport or had to call the IRS. But yes, the government is collecting all this stuff. No, it's not the same people at the DMV, but still it's the same question. But I have noticed that oftentimes more and more people are asking for your financial information. You know, and I'm like, why is this necessary? And I'm assuming that if you have to get financial information to determine your healthcare rates, I guess if they assume that you are not in a good financial position, then you are more reckless or something like that. And so you're not going to take as good a healthcare. You know, it's kind of like your insurance rates. If you're in debt, maybe your car insurance is going to be higher because car insurance rates do it too. But yes, if you're expecting the government to save you, we're not. Look, I work for the government as well, so I do understand. And that's what always amazes me is the government has like, I've been watching on Netflix, like, I forget what it's called, but it's basically like terrorism plots that were, you know, foiled. And watching it, it's fascinating that our government has like the CIA, you know, it has like, what did it say, like 40 something different, like security type, you know, special ops, intelligence agents. And there's a lot of brilliance in the government. But then again, at the same time, I'm like, man, you know, if you've ever had to deal with the IRS, you're just like, wow. But I'm a government worker too, so I get it. Are you a government contractor or consultant, William? I thought so. But I do. I'm always amazed at how like people think like the cloud seeding, which I mean, I get kind of how it works, but that they think like the government has conjured up the Hurricane Katrinas of the world. And I'm just like, I don't, maybe I'm just more naive on that. Like, I just don't know that our government can get it together, you know, because we generally can't get it together long enough to like pass some good legislation and stuff like that. So, okay. Identifying, protecting, we're going to talk about this. This is going to be a good, there's going to be a lot of points in here that you will need to know for your assignment too. But we talked last week about how important it is for you to make yourself feel human, to spend time with your family, your friends, read a book, whatever it is. These are the people in my life that I love, and these are the reasons why it's important to make yourself feel human. So you always need to remember why it is. That's my daughter and I in the top corner. Y'all know my dogs. That's my boyfriend in the middle, my mom and dad and sister and best friend in the top And then on the other side, that's my daughter and her best friend and my best friend in Vegas. These are the reasons why I do these things. These are the people in my life that I love, and that, you know, when school was over, when work is over, that I still want there to be there when I come home. So you need to make sure that you remember those people in your life. Okay, so what is PII? We've talked about this a little bit. It's any information about an individual, whether it's a direct or it can be linked or linkable to an individual. This is not something I feel like we need to probably hash over a lot. Everybody knows this part. You've got direct or linked information, which is something that is directly to me, or you can do the indirect and linkable, which is when you put them together, it's enough. And this is really important with, like, when you have to do statistical cell size suppression, you have to be really careful, because sometimes, you know, you can identify it, even if like the mandatory, you know, is 10 on your cell size. Well, depending upon like how many students are in your class, if there's only 12, maybe you want to go ahead and suppress all that. So you have to be really careful about that, because you do not want to, this was a voting data linkage thing, and how it was tied into medical data, how you can take medical data and voter data and be able to figure out information about a person, which is kind of crazy, because those are two separate voting systems. I mean, two different data systems. Okay, so the Fair Information Practices Act. This is essentially privacy principles that the Privacy Act of 1974 was based on, and it just tells you like the treatment of PII. One, it needs to be protected, but it has to be collected, maintained, and disseminated in accordance with law. So these principles are going to be things that you will need to look at in your assignments. It deals with the basic ones. Limitation on collection, like don't collect bank account information if you absolutely have no need for it. Don't do it just because you can. Don't collect Social Security number in full if you don't need it. It should be limited to what you can lawfully use and what you need. And then also, can you get the consent? Consent is best. But does the person, do I have knowledge that you're collecting this information on me? The data quality, we all know, you know, trash in, trash out. But it should be relevant to the purpose for which it's used and kept up to date. Because if it's not, I mean, what if your credit report wasn't kept up to date? Then it would be useless, right? It has to be used for the specific purpose at the time that it was collected. This is really important because the data may be collected at a certain point in time for a particular reason, but the company that's collected it might expand its business offerings. And you might have given information to your, say just for the school, you might have, you've given personal information to the school for purposes of providing you an education. However, though, you did not give them purposes to market a mortgage or a credit card or any other purposes. And I know those are really attenuated, but whatever purpose you collected it, just because you have it doesn't mean you can use it for any other purpose. And you want to limit its use. You know, how long do you need it? It doesn't need to be disclosed. It can't be used for any other purpose. And you have to provide reasonable safeguards against any kind of loss, unauthorized access, use, modification, or disclosure. So pretty much everything falls into one of these buckets. And it's much more broad than just protecting the confidentiality of it. You really have to, a privacy program really is a comprehensive set of principles and issues that organizations face, because it's in everything. It's from a technology standpoint. It is, you know, especially nowadays, more and more people are converting away from paper. But where are you storing it? Is it stored in a cloud? Well, I mean, is this cloud magical? Is it a government tenant cloud? Is it, you know, where are you storing the cloud? Where's your data center hosted? Is it in another country? because that might cause other issues. Like for the government, we cannot use store, transmit, send, house any data outside the continental US. But what happens if a company that we have a vendor that has a contract that works, like a call center that may have people around the world? Well, how do you get around them? They can't transmit data, and it can't, how do they access it? So these are things you got to really pay attention to. I'm amazed at the number of contracts I get that come across my desk that I ask people, well, where's your data being stored? They're like, oh, I don't know. I mean, if you think about it like Dropbox, people put information in Dropbox all the time. Where are their servers? I don't know the answer to this. I'm just asking. I don't know. But we do it so freely, but these are things that we can't do in the, like at work. Even though personally we're like, sure, sign me up. Okay, safeguarding. Oh, as I say, didn't physical safeguards, technical safeguards, and administrative operational safeguards. It's kind of where things fall into the buckets. You'll see oftentimes in standard contract language, things like we will take all, commercially reasonable administrative, physical, technical, administrative controls or something like that. Because if we're dealing, say, with a vendor, they're not going to maybe tell you their exact security protocol because, somebody could use that to their disadvantage. And so that's the kind of language. Okay, physical safeguards. We talk about things like lock a file cabinet, and these things go without saying, but I don't know where everybody works, but you can walk around and see people all the time with sensitive information all over the place. You shouldn't leave files, storage media, anything unattended or in vehicles. How many people in your office don't lock their screen? I always lock mine, but I used to work for a government contractor at the military base, and so you had to. But I mean, how many people, they just constantly have their screen up all day long, never lock it. You need to dispose of your records properly, and this is a big thing, that you put them in the shred bin. Do you know, or have you verified or have certification that the documents are actually being shredded? Some companies actually come on site with like a big truck that has a shredder in it and somebody sits out there and does it. But otherwise, do you have any kind of certification that they're being shredded? Or are they just throwing them in the trash? That's another thing too. People will throw, HR records in the trash. You need to, if you're storing PII, things need to be monitored with access limited. Secure access to buildings. These things go without saying, right? To me, these are things that I deal with every day, but yet it is the lowest common denominator. If you don't lock a file cabinet, it doesn't matter. Or if you let somebody into a building when it should be badge access, what's the purpose of having a secure data center if you just let everybody in? Technical. You need to ensure that all email, or really records in general, that have PII are encrypted and that they're access controlled. As an attorney, I have access to our HR records, but I actually, I don't have access to go see somebody's pay stub. So if I get a garnishment or something in to where I need to see somebody's pay stub, I have to go to HR and request it. I don't have access to all the HR files. I would have to go request one to get, even though I'm authorized to do it. You should have monitoring software and tools. But most importantly, minimize the data use and collection and retention. If you haven't done business with somebody in the last 8 years or 5 years or whatever your time frame is, you don't need to still have records from 20 years ago, unless there's some requirement specifically for that. Retention, there's a lot of pack rats. A few years ago, our Office of State Technology moved buildings, and most of those employees have been there for 30 years, 40. There's a lot of longevity, and those people were pack rats. We had to shred so much documentation because these people held on to everything. You need to properly de-identify information. And again, if you can't protect it, don't collect it. Okay, administrative safeguards. You got to create policies on how to handle it. You have to do training. I think our CISO told us yesterday, because we were discussing about how to do training and getting people like, using AI literacy. But 20% of the workforce still clicks on phishing links. And if they can't be trained not to do that, how are you going to protect them against what can be put in AI and not? So that's one of the things we discussed yesterday. So you have to stay up to date and follow compliance rules and guidance. We're going to have a whole lecture on privacy impact assessments, but does anybody do those or know what they are? Anybody online? Do you have experience or know what a privacy impact assessment is? If you work for the federal government, you probably do. Yeah. Okay, so several people online are, but privacy impact assessments, and again, that's actually going to be one of your assignments, but it's a tool to go through that anytime there's an upgrade or a new system enhancement, could be anything, or the new development, a new application, that actually takes you through, like, what data is this touching? What changes are going to be made? Is, certain things need to be identified? Who needs to have access? But it actually goes through and assesses the privacy of the system and application, so you know how to better protect it. It's going to, like I said, it's going to be one of your assignments, so you'll talk about it more later. A proper incident response plan. That's also one of your assignments later, so we'll talk a lot about that. And I think it's always important to regularly review to determine if PII is still required, because it might have been required at one point in time, but it may not be anymore. How's everybody online holding up?
Pretty good.
No, you're not holding up? William said it's hopefully part of the governance and done early in a program. Otherwise, it's hard to do after the fact. And that is 1000% true. Privacy is often thought of as an afterthought right now, and it's hard to go back, especially, in a lot of legacy systems. So if you try to, like, people who can implement a privacy impact assessment, maybe you can't go back and reconfigure your mainframe, but we know that everything on the mainframe is coming off. Like, we're about to decommission our mainframe. So as those start moving to new processes, you roll them through the privacy impact assessment. But yes, it absolutely needs to be done early. And William said that people who understand the data and usage may no longer be there. And that's true, because again, especially with a lot of the, and people say, oh, well, we'll remember this. Well, in 20 years from now, I might not be working here. What's going to happen? And that's why you should always write it down. Okay. Now, assignment 1 is due like in 2 weeks. You're the CPO of this company, and you got to write a CPO plan. So some of the things in protecting PII that you will need to know, you might want to consider some of these issues for what you would do as a CPO. 1, you need to identify all the PII in your system.
Yes. You said assignment 1 due date is September 3rd.
Yeah, was that 2 weeks or is that next week? I have it written down on the last slide what the due date was, but yeah, so yeah, it is next week. Don't panic. I have it written down on the last slide. The point to all that was, these are some of the things you might need to know for that assignment. Unless AI has already done your assignment for you. Okay, so you need to identify all the data. You can't protect data if you don't know what you have. And this is baffling to me. We went through a data inventory one time and we asked people to identify their data sources. Some departments had lists of data sources, and one major department had 3. 3 sources of data? No. But you can't protect it if you don't know what you have. It may be things that, you no longer need, but you need to know this. You need to know the state of it. It could be what's your contractor holding, what's in your, okay, so those of y'all online, my laptop has died, so if you have comments, you're going to have to verbally speak them. But it could be shared storage. It could be what your contractor holds, but you've got to do a data inventory. Number one, you want to minimize the use and collection and retention of PII to what's strictly necessary to accomplish your purpose and use. The big important thing here is like have clean out days or purge days, or avoid duplicative requests. If you are like especially working for a government or an entity that does multiple different services, why would I have to give you my personal information 22 times? I mean, like how many times do you go to the doctor and still have to fill out the same information multiple times? Can you avoid that? If so, one, it makes the customer experience so much better. But if you are only collecting it once, then that's only once that you have to record that you have to constantly protect and maintain and secure, not multiple ones.
Well, can I input on there? So
Please.
Yeah. So when you go to the
Who is it?
This is Bill Heenan.
Hi, Bill.
Yeah, if you go to the doctor and you change your insurance or they change their systems, which seems like it's every time I go, you're filling out paperwork again. One for the new insurance card, which you get every year. They change their back office system or they are no longer part of whatever group they were. Guess what? They either all of a sudden your data has to be publicly available and transferred and shared, or you fill it out again.
Well, and that is true. So when you are dealing with things, I mean, and you're right, the doctors are awful. But like for me, so if I go to a clinic that is part of a hospital system, they should have my information somewhat already there. If it's outside of that, then I understand why I have to fill it out again. But if you're within the same thing, like, or even like state services, just say you are applying for Medicaid because you are low income and you need some assistance with your medical care. But you also qualify for SNAP benefits, which come, food stamps. Wouldn't it, even though they're two separate programs, wouldn't it make more sense for somebody to be able to fill out one application? Or better yet, fill out one application and maybe tell me all the programs I might be qualified for? I mean, as a citizen, I feel like that would be a better use of my time. Or if I go to renew my driver's license. Now, perhaps there are reasons why you don't want your address to be updated, say on your hunting and fishing license versus your driver's license or something else. Maybe you have like a permanent residence and where you're living now. But wouldn't it also make sense if I go to change my address when I get a new driver's license and have the option at least to say, please change it everywhere? So that way I don't have to go to every other place in which I have a system to do that in the state, or at least within a reasonable, yes, change my SNAP benefits. Yes, change my Medicaid. Yes, change my hunting and fishing license. There are ways in which to do that.
Wouldn't that be like a digital identity where you just keep it in one place and then update it everywhere else?
Well, I think that would make sense, but like I say, the state unfortunately still operates on a whole lot of paper. The problem is, and we had this discussion again yesterday when we were talking about the AI. The idea is that oftentimes, at least for the state of Arkansas, I can't speak about any other state or maybe some healthcare or something like that, but we treat like a citizen, like just say if I needed food stamps, we treat that specific program need. It's all programmatically rather than like a holistic approach of treating the citizen. Like just say if I'm low income and I go to the state for services, maybe I don't know that there's all these programs that can help me get food stamps, get Medicaid, maybe get job training that can help with childcare. So that way I can get job training to go into the workforce, or there's a disability support services who could maybe help me work through a disability to get there. I, as a citizen, may not know that, but we don't treat an overall citizen. We treat the program. Medicaid is a program, so it's kind of siloed. And a lot of it comes down to breaking the silos, because Medicaid siloed, SNAP siloed, rehab services is siloed, workforce services is siloed. And until some of those silos are broken down, which, you know, theoretically AI can definitely help with. Also, Arkansas does have a data hub that has helped to put a lot of that siloed data together to kind of recognize that. But it has not reached basically how can we help a citizen as a whole. So, but yes, theoretically, it would be nice if you had a digital ID and could say, I'd like to change it everywhere. However, I will tell you, oftentimes people do not want to change their driver's license address because they don't want people to find them. If you owe lots of money in child support, you don't want to put your new address on there. However, there are a lot of states, I don't know yet if Arkansas is doing it, it might be doing it and I don't know it, that people who are behind on child support, you know, they don't want to update their address. But if you are a hunter or a fisher, you better bet your address is updated on your hunting and fishing license. So they're starting to connect that data to find all the other addresses you might use to try to locate you, to serve you, to get you to pay your child support. So there are some reasons like that from a, you know, criminal avoidance standpoint that people don't want to do that. But that's where it comes down, breaking down the silos.
Isn't it legally required though in the state of Arkansas that your ID, the address on your ID matches your actual residence?
It's supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, because I've had a motorcycle police officer like just pull me over because of one of my license out, and they just wanted to see my. And they said, "Is this your home address?" And I was like, "No, I moved like a week or two ago." I mean, I really had.
Right.
And then he was like, "Here's a $500 ticket."
For like a week?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Now,
I just
yeah, and so he was like, just drive down there and
Get it?
and get it changed, and then they'll take the
Yeah.
ticket away. But it was a really high fine.
Right.
It's expensive.
Okay, online, what were you saying?
I just want to say this is Mahir, and
Hi.
many European countries don't have address on the driver's license or the ID card.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, no, it's actually good.
Oh, I know, but it's crazy. The difference is what I'm saying
Right.
is and that's why if you are working in a company that does business globally, there are so many different things to pay attention to. So, but a lot of Europeans, I mean, you can use like a digital ID. Right?
Yeah, I put a link. I put a link maybe for everybody to see. Like in
My
Estonia,
laptop died that I was reading all of it on. Sorry, and I can't do the PowerPoint and see all the comments just on the
no, that's fine. But
professor here.
for example, in Estonia, in Europe, you can use your digital ID to do everything online, votes, sign medical records, everything. You can't only marry, divorce, and buy property. Everything else you can do digitally.
Well, I was somebody yesterday mentioned that like in the UAE, there's like essentially a digital citizen portal that like they can renew their passport in like 5 seconds. I don't know if y'all have ever tried to renew your passport, or more importantly, if you've ever tried to renew your global entry. You don't get that done in any normally. I mean, I think it took 14 months for my renewal. This was a renewal. I had already done that. It was a 14-month turnaround time for my renewal. So we have a lot of challenges. And a lot of it, I will say, is political. Some people, you know, there's a big push right now in Arkansas for people to go away from voting machines at a voting location and go back to doing paper ballots and hand counting them, which to me is the opposite way that technology is going. A lot of countries all have digital voting. We're having the battle in Arkansas about just still being able to use like the voting machines at your local polling place. So again, I think politics plays a big role. Okay. You need to categorize all your PII by a confidentiality impact level. Some people call it low, medium, high, bronze, silver, gold, however you want to do it. But the levels should indicate the potential harm that could result if that data was inappropriately accessed or used or disclosed. Now, even your low level data still needs to be protected. But like if you're designing a data center, you're going to have certain protocols on machines that have, say, health records on them, maybe differently from court records, because court records are open to the public, even though some are redacted. You still want to protect them, but your health information needs to be protected at a higher level, and that might be the difference of you might need to get a badge to come into the data center, but once you're in there, we can let you walk amongst where your rack is and your server. If it's a high level, maybe you have to be escorted. Maybe we will not allow external media to be plugged into the server. Maybe it requires a multi-factor authentication to log into the server compared to low or moderate. But you have to categorize your data, which means you have to know what your data is. So you have to decide what factors go into this to create your policy, your procedure, and the controls. Like, again, some of the factors might be, how can PII be used to identify specific individuals? Like if you've got a social security number, directly identifiable, but a phone number or an area code, not as much. Or how many people, like do you have 25 records in this, or is it 25 million? There's a big difference. Now, if you're one of those 25 people, it still matters and it still needs to be protected. But if you've got the potential that you've got, 1 million records that you're processing versus this one over here only has a few, you have to kind of look at that. You have to look at how sensitive each field is, which we just talked about that, what it's being used for, what obligations you have. Like I say, there might be some federal or state regulation that requires a certain type of protection. And where is it being stored and who has access? So these are all factors that go into determining what data level you have, low, medium, or high. Usually most people have it on a little quadrant and where it falls out. And once you determine what your confidentiality levels are, you have to determine what safeguards apply. You've got to have your policies and procedures, which again, your data governance is going to be huge everywhere you go. And if you don't have it up front, it's harder to do later. Or you just have people doing all their own thing. You need to give training. I think training is completely lacking in most places. You need to give training before you get people access to PII and regularly train them afterwards. De-identify where you can, use your access control policies. Transmission. I'm always amazed at we have terminated some people at work before because they put sensitive information in Dropbox, or they'll email it to themselves or something like that. Do you have a shared server? Does your email, I know like Office 365, you can implement ways that if it detects a social security number format, it'll strip it and won't send it. Things of that nature. You have to put these things in place because again, you all know these things. The people that you will be working directly with know these things. Think about in terms of like, does your mother or your grandmother know these things? Are they going to know what to do? We've probably scared them so many times about don't click on a link or that was just a scam text that they probably do. But think about it in terms of somebody who is not technical at all, that doesn't work with technology, and think about what they are going to do. It's kind of like they have the Tide Pods, like do not eat. It's not for, internal use on the Tide Pods. And they had to design that for somebody who tried it out. That's essentially what you have to do. And you need to audit. And another thing goes in auditing is like, do you have a risk score assessment? There are companies, if you don't have the tools, there are companies that will come in and check your systems that will risk out your landscape. And so you know what to beef up. You need to develop a data response plan to handle incidents. I mean, what's going to happen when the fire alarm goes off, right? We have to practice this. And you know, one plan can work, and it just depends on, and I don't think I put it in there. I had one I was going to bring. But you know, what kind of incident occurred? Like, did something get attached to an email that shouldn't? Did somebody plug a flash drive in and they got ransomware on the network? That's going to be a different thing versus, you know, I lost 5 envelopes on the way to the post office that had paychecks in them or something like that. So everything, you know, you have to look at everything as an incident. Now, it may not be a cyber incident. It may not be a breach, but it could be an incident. So you need to have a way of what happened, who was impacted, what are we going to do, what kind of corrective action are we going to take, who do you have to notify, and, you know, is there any remedial service necessary? And most importantly, privacy is not the responsibility of just one person. Yes, you may have a privacy officer, but the idea of privacy needs to be integrated with security, IT, legal, could be your general users, because it's everyone's. And again, your responsibility is just going to be like, I remember somebody saying something one time about this, and we might need to call legal. That's really what you're going to get. We hope you get out of this class, is that you recognize issues. Just going to make you infinitely more valuable. Okay, so yeah, Tim and I came up with these last year. If you or the year before, if you collect it, you got to protect it, and if in doubt, leave it out. And if the glove don't fit, you must acquit, because that's what it sounds like. And just because you've been doing it a certain way all this time doesn't mean you can't do it a different way, or that there's not a better way. I mean, the whole point is technology has changed so many things for the better. Like, you might have a program that used to do this, but guess what? We can do it better now. So we redevelop it, we redesign it, we build privacy into it. Okay, now I will tell you, there's like 3 slides of best practices. I'm not reading off all of these. Y'all can do it. You might need them for your assignments later. These are just things to think about. I'm just going to put them on there. We talked a lot about this. You know, you got to know what kind of PII you have. You have to build policies around it. You have to classify it. You have to protect it from a physical standpoint. You have to train. You have to properly dispose of it. And you have to act in an ethical, informed, and trustworthy manner. This might not be your data, but somebody in your position has your data. How do you want them to respond? Let me get all these out. Oh. You want to build privacy into all new applications. This is where your privacy impact assessments, if it builds into new or upgraded applications, then you can just do that from then on. It's very difficult to go back because, again, you might be so stuck on that mainframe, or everybody has that one, you know, Fortran or COBOL program that's still running out there for one function that you just can't change it. But until you do, you still need to monitor. You want to test, triple test all new applications. You want to monitor the use. You want to ensure that employees screening for sensitive positions that have access to, you know, you don't want unauthorized access, and you have to enforce security standards and procedures. A lot of this is all building a governance structure, an integrated one that, again, maybe your enterprise architecture teams, your IT, legal, nowadays your AI, because that is exploding. I think it's moving. I think we had the discussion yesterday that we think that AI might be even bigger than the internet was. I don't know. You have to set a culture of privacy. So when you're the CEOs or you're the leaders, you have to set a culture of privacy, because people are going to look to you how to act. when you take things off site, don't leave them in your car. Like, don't leave your laptop in your car. I mean, at least put it in the trunk, Don't send it unless it's encrypted on via email. Use password protection. Choose a password that others can't guess and change frequently. I will tell you this, when I got here on the lectern, I had to reset my password to Blackboard. And I put a password in, which I thought was, yeah, I mean, it was special characters, numbers, and all that. And it said, your password essentially doesn't meet the criteria. But it didn't tell me what the criteria was. I mean, it was like 12 characters, special characters, no recognizable word. I don't know what it was because it didn't tell me. It just said you don't meet it. Well, how am I supposed to, at least tell me what I need to meet. But we all have some passwords that we reuse. We do. Yeah, the peripheral storage device is kind of going away, but flash drive, I put a flash drive. That's how I brought my lecture here today. So that is something to pay attention to. But the deal is, you do not want to be the weakest link. You want to be aware. You want to maintain awareness. It's easy throughout the day to get sloppy and want to click on a phishing link or something like that. I got a DocuSign one that I was actually expecting a DocuSign. And so when it came in, I clicked on it. I was expecting it, and it was a test at work, so then I had to go through training. But I was expecting it, So, it's one of those kind of things that it's hard. So you have to be aware, and you have to set a culture. If you go into your coworker's office and y'all are about to leave for lunch and they've left their computer open, it's your responsibility to say, hey, man, lock that. Because, if they get into their computer, yours isn't safe. You have to think twice about what you do collect, what you use, what you maintain, and how you disclose it. It's a team effort, okay? It's a team effort. I love that cartoon. You spelled confidential wrong. Now, because nowadays, like I say, and people all the time, I'm amazed at the phone calls and things that people will do in public on their phone. People amaze me. On speaker. And then my dogs, just because who does not feel better looking at pictures of dogs, right? Dogs just make everything better. Or cats if you're a cat person. I'll get with that. But dogs just make everything better. Those little faces are at home. I did not get my Chinese food last week. I pulled in the parking lot at 8:30 and they closed at 8:30. However, though, the dogs won out because I went to McDonald's and they got chicken nuggets. So they were happy. Okay, so a few things before we close. What time is it? Ooh, Tim will be upset I did not keep you. It's only 7:35. Maybe should I just keep talking for a little bit and drag it out? No, I won't do that to you. So a few things. So next week, and I guess it's on my other presentation. If somebody posted online, I can't hear it. I can hear a ding, but I can't see the message. You'll have to verbally talk.
I was saying it's 8:35 here.
Yeah, thanks.
There you go. Okay, well, 8:35. I've got 5 minutes left. We're going to have to wrap up. I like this Eastern time zone business. Like I say, I will just tell you now, Tim is fantastic as a lecturer. He's a fantastic human being, but he will keep you till 8:40. So, or close to it. But he is fantastic. So he's super knowledgeable. He's one of the smartest people I know. He's great. So next week, your first assignment's due. It's a CPO plan, 30, 60, 90 days. So
no discussion this week?
Oh, no, you're going to get a discussion this week. But your CPO plan, just think about some of the things that we did. So you're hired. Now, this could be a memo like to the board of directors or to your hiring partner or the CEO. I had somebody one time create a presentation. Please don't do that. That's overkill for the 5-point assignment. But, and it needs to be generic, not generic, high level enough, but not so high level that I really don't know. So keep in mind, it goes back to your scenario. You've been hired for this company. So what would you need to do? I've got to go back and read the assignment again, but like what kind of company is it? Are you going to probably have a lot? Maybe you need to go like talk to people in the company, right? Like figure out what they do. Maybe you need to ask and do a data inventory. Maybe you need to find out, do you have a privacy policy? If so, is it updated or when was it last reviewed? If not, maybe you need to draft one. Now, these are all not things you're going to do in your first 30 days because that's not how the world works. But it's things like that. Like, how are you essentially going to build a privacy program? What steps would you take and what information would you need to know? And again, you can do 30 days, bullets. The bullets need to be sufficient enough to know that you've read the scenario and that you're thinking, but it don't make it so generic that it could apply to the local plumbing company or to, Google. You don't want to make it so generic that you don't know, but it's things like that. Like, again, maybe you need to know what kind of data you collect. Are you the first CPO? Because if not, maybe y'all already have a privacy program made. I don't know. You may have to decide that for yourself. Things like that. But essentially, how are you going to build this privacy governance structure? So that's what your first assignments do. Now, Tim and I, and I'll make a post on this so you'll know, we do allow you to work as a partner on assignments 2 through 5. You do not have to select a partner, but if you want to work as a partner, we will set a date for when you have to get your partner assignments to me. And you will work with the same partner for the rest of the assignments, not assignment 1, but for the rest of them. The only difference from partner groups is 5%, not 5%, 5 points of your final grade will be based on your partner participation. And we've had some partners who say, my partner was great. And we've had some that say, my partner didn't do a thing. And so that 5 points could make or break a difference. So choose wisely. Your partner does not have to be in the same section you are. So if you've got a partner that's online or asynchronous or whatever, we don't care. So I'll send out a message on that. If you want to work with a partner, you don't have to though. Next week, we're going to really be working on our privacy policy and privacy notices. And then the week after that, I believe, if I'm looking at it correctly, we're going to have a work day for your first assignment. Your first big substantive assignment on those. But I try to give you all the information you need in the lecture for next week for the privacy policy. There's some cheat sheets because I know exactly where everybody's going to fail on the assignments. And so I got cheat sheets that are built in there for you. So I try to give you all the information that you're going to need. I'll try to tell you when you need to really pay attention to the lecture or not for the assignments. But if anybody have any questions, because we're running out on Eastern time.
Just one
Oh,
quick
sorry.
question.
I have one.
What is, okay.
So this is here on the assignment that's for next week on the 30, 60, 90 plan. There's no page limit, like how long it needs to be, or word limit or anything like that. It's just like what okay.
No, there's no page limit, but typically think about it as you've been hired. And so there is some C-suite, whether like you report to a chief data officer, you report to the CISO, you report to the CEO or board of directors. They are not going to read a 10-page plan.
Right.
They
So it's
just
kind of like an
want
executive
summary.
almost
Yeah.
summary. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, again, and you need to be specific enough that we know that you've actually like paid attention to the scenario, but not so detailed that it is a full comprehensive plan, if that makes sense.
My question was similar because I see there's a backstory to like Quantum Leap. So
Yep.
for our first assignment, we're supposed to be working with the backstory and the locations mentioned in the backstory.
Yes, all your assignments are going to be based on that.
Okay, thank you.
And this is the thing that where I say, like, I have to go back and look at it again, but has there been a CPO before you? And keep in mind, Tim and I intentionally leave facts out. You can make them up. You just have to tell us, like, if you make any assumptions on any of your assignments, you just have to give us an assumptions list. Like, I assumed I was the first CPO and I'm starting from scratch. Or my assumption is I have an unlimited budget. Or I'm assuming that there were privacy policies already in place. Whatever you make the assumption, because what's going to happen is, like, just say on your CPO plan, you do not mention anything about developing a privacy plan, privacy policy, excuse me. We're going to think you forgot. But if you say, I made the assumption that we already had one in place and it didn't need any updates. Okay. So that way I know you thought about it. Or you could say, I'm not the first one, so there's already a privacy policy in place, but we're going to review it. Review existing policies. That's okay too. But we intentionally don't give you all the facts, so that's where you get to be creative and make it up. And for those of anybody who might not have been here last week or didn't listen to the lecture, I would encourage you to heavily and frequently read the class scenario, because all your assignments are going to be based on that. And the people who have done well in this class have put effort into understanding that. The writing a privacy policy, the writing a privacy impact assessment, writing even really the final assignment is not the hard part. The hard part is knowing what to put in each of those, and it's where you're going to get that information out of the scenario. So keep that in mind. Okay, now what was your question?
I was trying to find the slides on Blackboard.
Okay, now these slides they're not out there yet.
Oh.
I post them usually the next morning, but look at them dogs' faces. Can you tell my daughter's grown? So that's why I've got dogs at the house. Can y'all see that online now?
Yes, we see computer screen background.
Okay. Let me.
Just hitting behind me because it's small.
The new Blackboard. I'm like, just when I think I got it figured out, they changed the system on me, right? It's like just when I figure out where everything is on my iPhone, they do an update. Okay, so let me move it over here. Okay, can y'all see the weekly materials and all that?
Yep.
Okay, so every week we will go out here and post in your weekly materials the lecture slide deck and the recording and your question. So we try to put it all in one place so you're not having to fumble through to find it.
And that's just in part until 8:40 tonight or the morning. It'll all get up there.
Yes, it usually gets up there. A lot of it just depends on whether Tim or I wake up first and get it posted. It depends on, whether work's calling already, but it's usually posted usually by noon. So any other questions? Now, and Tim and I, of course, next week your assignments your CPO plan is generally, most people get full credit because, they're learning and all that. It's 5 points. You're going to get full credit. But next week when we talk about privacy notices and privacy policies, we will also have a work day that you do not have to come, but it will be a virtual class only. But if you have questions about your assignments, and even on the CPO plan, you can always send them to us, email, and we will be glad to get you some feedback. We won't grade them, but we will get you some feedback so you know, like, hey, am I on the right track, or can I do this? This class is usually most difficult because we give you so much freedom, like make up the facts that are missing, or can you get creative, or can you do this, or is there a page count? No, it's just whatever. And oftentimes the data scientist, computer scientist, they don't, or just really students in general don't like all that. I mean, I was that way too until law school. Like, I want to know, does this have to be fact or fiction? Does it 1-inch margins? How many pages? Double spaced? I want to know the parameters. And in this class, we don't really give them to you. And that's usually one of the struggles. So we will be glad to provide you feedback.
My question is actually pretty silly, but it's been hurt in my head. So for week 2, for next week, we read chapter 8. Because the way I see that when I'm looking at week 2 materials, it's saying reading, I don't know if I need to have it read by week 2 or I have it read for the following week. I mean, I've already got it.
Oh,
You get what I'm saying?
yeah, no,
Like,
generally the reading will always be posted. So whatever the reading is, will be that lecture that night. Yeah.
That week, but everything else will be the materials and the discussion questions.
Okay, because Tim is not here, and I hope he doesn't, if he goes back and reads this, listens to this lecture, I'm going to deny and just say it was AI generated. But I will give you a helpful hint. If the reading is stressing you out compared to your other classes, the reading is helpful, but it is not going to make or break your performance in this class. The reading is helpful just for knowledge, but like I say, if the reading is stressing you out, skip it when it comes to your other classes. So pro tip there. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying we try to give you everything that you need. Any other questions? Okay, we've stayed till a respectable 7:50 Central Time. 8:50, we're late Eastern Time.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
See-
If y'all, like I said, feel free to reach out if you have any questions anytime.